Hey, what's up, guys? Meaning for a while to talk about some blue green since had a standout performance this weekend with it, and just wanted to introduce myself first. Talk about what my credentials are. Some of you guys may know me from old Pixelborn from the name Fungus, or see me in some of these chats. Um, had a lot of different money finishes, but most recently at CCS had a top 8 in the 2K and went X3 with a spicy list that I've had a lot of questions on. So I wanted to get some content there for you. I'm joined by JP, John Prayer, who is you may know from his Birmingham performance, where he top 32 the DLC, and of course qualified for Continentals. Currently top 5 on the ladder with a similar list that we're going to talk about today. So we really wanted to just go through some of this since there's a lot of questions and there's been kind of some like what should I put in the list, what shouldn't I put in the list, that kind of thing. So we'll go through some of the history and some play lines and some basic stuff today. John, what
Yeah.
you got for us?
Hello guys, and welcome to the wonderful world of blue green. And here we are with our Statlix. And what does it mean to be a Stax? Can you explain that
Yeah, of course.
a little bit?
Stax comes from if you're an old school Magic player, you know this the card Smokestacks from when that came out. Basically, we're just talking about resource denial and getting to a point where um, you can't play the game in a normal fashion, right? Like restricting off different avenues of play, making you play kind of to a play style that is going to be very narrow, where we have the advantage. And this list we have on the screen here, while is kind of the first iteration that I picked up from John in the 20 Lord Discord. I know he was working with a lot of different people back and forth here, but I'll let him talk about this list and kind of how he came to it for set 8.
Yeah, so this one is like the first good iteration of the deck because I've been working on the deck like since end of six set, basically playing it whole six seven, pardon, it's a whole set seven, and then absolutely started grinding the list in set eight because we had some wonderful additions in mainly Basil. It's just one card, but one card that absolutely changes the decks to a new heights. And basically, what it does, as you explained, it's a resource denial, it's control, but a lot of people will say like, "Oh, Ruby Amethyst, it's control." This one is a little bit more controlling. You are not really focusing on the board. You look at the list and where's the win condition, how do you win, and that's maybe the thing about Stax decks, that they don't really need a win condition. Once they lock you and they will deny everything you do, they will just grind you out and win with inavailability. How's the word? Inavailability? Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So basically, once the log is established and you are on the other side of the table, you can just basically do nothing, and we will grind you out with a Tipo and one Clarabel on the board. So as you can see in the list, it's pretty standard ramping of the Sapphire, which is for sale for Tipo. Then we see our first control element, which are the Muses and Lady Tremaine, which we have later a deeper discussion because the card is very interesting and very core to the deck. Of course, we can see like the big boom, which is the bend to my will, and a lot of controlling cards that will activate muses, deny opponent board, and everything else is basically supporting stuff and digging through the right answers. And of course, Clarabel, which is also very important for the deck because we need to refill and get our answers to everything. So this is pretty much a pure control of the list. And as I believe you did some changes to the list because before we went to the big tournaments, CCS in America, I believe.
Yeah, So basically, picked up the list as John had it here. They was working on throughout in the Discord for the lore 20 for blue green. Tried it as is. I believe at one point we had some little Clarabels in and out of this list too, which I wasn't super
Yes.
happy with how they were performing. People tend to have removal for it, at least in the set 8 and the kind of the metagame that fleshed out. So it broadcast pretty early, and it didn't have as much impact in the overall deck. I'll show here the next list. This is the list that I played at CCS both days. I played in the 11K where I went X3, and then the next day in the 2K where I was able to top 8 with X11. Really, the strengths as I found the deck were that it just beat up all of the matchups that prey upon the Amber Steel decks. So we're talking about your purple reds, your purple blues, and your blurples, and most of the green purple decks, depending on how they're configured, as well as the control decks. Right, both the blue red builds, both the shark build and the items build, I think are a favored matchup, which we'll talk about a little later. But really attracted to me was like just how dominant this deck was against some of those decks in early testing on the ladder, and I was able to get like top 20 on the ladder within a couple of days with this list. And really, I think the play style is something people don't see coming a lot of times. A lot of these cards are cards that you don't see in the mainstream. Like, who is expecting to be hit with a bend of your will, right? It's very unconventional play style. So I made a couple of changes here. Really, the main changes I ended up going with was Peter Pan was performing for me well in the ladder. It got me out of a lot of different situations. So I did throw that back in the list, and I think John had it in one of his earlier lists too. So it was something probably on the radar. And I went to 4 Develop Your Brains, just trying to have consistency on the play line of that we're going to talk about later, which is really just your 1, 2, 3 of how you want this deck to play out. I'm going to transition.
Yeah. So you have mentioned.
Oh, go ahead, John.
Sorry. You have mentioned the Peter Pan and a lot of other stuff that was in the list. The list actually went through a major changes, and you mentioned small Clarabels. They were there to try to combat the discard strategies, and we tried Genie 6 cost, which was my favorite from the last set. There was also in my Enchanted Tour run that I went 4-2, missing top cut by 1 game. There was a Lucky Dime also. So in this deck there are a lot of cards. There are like 100 cards that you can put in the deck. So the list changes completely and turned around and went back to where it was. And I think your changes here are really nice because the Peach Pan will actually stop like sharks playing manners. Well, it will not stop them from playing manners, but it will stop them from gaining any lore, which is extremely important. Also, purple steel, it blocks like the cobras, it blocks goats and stuff like that, which is really good. And also, as you mentioned, a lot of players do not know the cards that are in the deck. I mean, maybe you do, but you could. It's really funny how many people need to read what Peter Pan does and so on, so it will catch people off guard. And I see that you played 2 Strike a Good Match, which is the same thinking as Develop Your Brain, and having 6 Develop Your Brains is pretty good as well, because as we get to going through our deck really fast and seeing all the cards is pretty core to the list.
Yeah, I'm gonna flip through this. This is the list I played at CCS, and there definitely are some changes I would make to the deck, and I know John and I talked about it kind of afterwards. So I'm gonna flip over to a list that John and I kind of cooked up after the fact, and we came to a very similar conclusion here. Biggest add that we have is really just trying to shore up that Amber Steel matchup and see if we can gain some percentage points on the draw. And this is where Kit Cloudkicker came into play. We started throwing that card around. Of course, Lewis was another card that was thrown around as a potential. But really not many changes at this point. Is going up on Heffalips and Woozles and incorporating some Kit Cloudkickers to try to have some points in that matchup. I'll show just another list here, but this is my version of it. I only big difference is John is still fairly high on playing that one Tamatoa, where I didn't see the value in it in my play lines, but I could definitely see it being an include here as well. I also recently went up to 4 Heffalumps and Woozles, again, just trying to gain percentage points in that matchup. So, John, have you liked the kit so far in your testing?
It's it's kind of funny because they do things where they should do things, but they are not flexible. Um, in one of my lists that I felt very confident before we started our back and forth was Louis, which is basically filling the same niche as Kit, because that's a removal where you get Pete. It's not really a removal, but it's something that will stop your opponent just for a little bit. And in my eyes, Louis was a little bit better because he could stop anything. You can think about Big Tamatoa or something like that. Kid, on the other hand, is like he will stay on the board untapped, which could lead to him being a singer. And the point that you made that sold me on the kid more than on Louis was versus Green Steel targeting a singing Ursula, Deceiver of All. So that's why I added him to the list instead of the Louis, just because of the Ursula. And unfortunately, I haven't played much. I mean, like one game, maybe two, against Green Steel. So I'm not 100% sure on him. But the idea is there, the philosophy fits. So for now, the kid is in the list.
Yeah, and I'm not entirely sold on how many percentage points we're actually getting by changing the list too much. Let me talk about that here in a little bit. Flipping over to talk about some of the matchups, and I just pulled a screenshot of the 8 decks situation for the last 2 weeks. Because the metagame is changing quite a bit. I didn't want to pull from maybe a month's worth. Week over week, really, the metagame has changed quite a bit. Um, but as of the last 2 weeks, this is kind of how the performance of the deck is looking, and I'll talk about some of the matchups that I played recently this weekend and kind of how those went. And John, maybe give us some insight too. At CCS, I played one I'll focus on first here is of course the Amber Still aggro, kind of the the problem in the room, right? Everybody has to at least
Yeah, the
acknowledge it.
boogeyman.
I played Amber Still aggro 8 times this last week over the course of those 2 tournaments, and of course in the main event, the 11K, I played it 6 times. So of those
And what was the score? Final score?
4-2. So I was able to win 4 of them and lose 2 of them.
Nice.
Ultimately, that I still think that is our worst matchup, and as long as that matchup is in the metagame, we at least have to acknowledge either that we have a difficult matchup into it, or maybe try to put these tech cards in, where we're putting stuff like Cloud Kicker in to try to gain some percentage points there. I don't think it's unwinnable on the play. I definitely, obviously, was able to win quite a few games, and then the skill of your opponent kind of plays into it quite a bit.
Definitely.
As far as the rest of these tier 1 decks are concerned, Blurple sitting right up there and Steel Song, I think, are both very favored matchups. John, do you want to talk about your experience with those a little bit?
Well, so let's talk about three decks. It's the classic Steel Song and Blurple and the aggro. The aggro is like the boogeyman, right? The one that we fear the most, but it's playable and it's actually winnable on the play. You are able to stop them. That's the main point. And if you are able to stop them at 17 lower, and you can be 17 to 0, and if you actually establish the lock and if you stop them, you win the game. So you have time. And but on the draw, the time gets way shorter, so that's really problematic matchup. So it's a little bit, if you sit down to a table, it comes to a coin flip maybe, but it still heavily relies on the skill of your opponent. If you made the right choices, maybe like targeting the right stuff, maybe playing the right cards, not playing into muses and so on. So Ember Steel aggro definitely one of the worst matchup, but the kids should help in that situation. So yeah, we basically established that one is one of the bad matchups. But when we are at the Steel Song and Brewer Pro, both of those are really good. Maybe depending on the skill of your opponent and if he knows what we are playing. If he understands our deck, then the matchup gets a little bit worse, but it's like with everything. At this moment, we have the element of surprise, which is really important. And yeah, both of those are pretty good matchups. Brewer Pro can be a little bit problematic if they are playing four Hades and they are top decking them back to back. But otherwise, I would pick those matchups any day of the week.
Yeah, the Blurple matchup really, the Blurple player often, if you played that deck or if you played against that deck before, they tend to keep a very healthy hand, which is where a 7-drop
Yeah.
Clarabel really just shines, right? Like, we can dump our hand and gain value on board over and over and over again, and generate resources off of the fact that just their deck wants to be playing these cards, like Finders Keepers, and things like that. Hades can be something of an issue just because if they can ramp just like we can, right? They can get to that Clarabel with a Hades, potentially set you back a little bit. But honestly, the drawing 4 or 5 cards on that turn sometimes is just so much to bury them in card advantage. Oftentimes you'll Clarabel, draw so many cards, and then bend them right afterwards, and they really don't have any recourse. As far as that
Yeah,
steals,
exactly. So, yeah.
as far
Yeah,
as
go
the
ahead.
Steel Song matchup is concerned, really it's just all about the muses, right? Like, we don't really care if they're aerial
Yeah.
and getting songs as long as they don't have that
Yeah.
board position to be able to leverage those songs. They can have as many cards in hand as they want. We ramp so hard they don't really want to whole new world, so it becomes a situation where, yes, they have a healthy hand, and yes, they have all the resources they want in the world, but Muses just dominates that game, and a lot of their resources don't actually get to come into play. That little bit less aggressive line, right, versus the actual aggro Amber Steel just gives us enough time to bully them. And that's been my experience over the
Yeah,
last
exactly.
weekend.
The time is really, really important here. And basically, if you can go just like Polyclone 1, ramp on turn 2, play Muses, maybe next turn play another Muses, and just take it slowly. Do not exert them, do not sing with them. Maybe develop a Donald once you have like a singer and Muses active. It's pretty much over because they want to and need to develop their singers, which are all a low strength. And with that, muses just go ham, like absolutely. And as you said, even if they will, they give the control deck where our cards are more valuable than their cards. They will just give us 7 cards. You can just next turn sing with muses, bounce everything, play band, and have a good day, man.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well. I think a few others we want to kind of recognize here. I put Amethyst Ruby. I don't want to talk about that one a ton. That really ends up playing out the same as the Blur Bowl a lot of times. Obviously, JP
It's way
mentioned.
easier.
Yeah, JP mentioned that
In my
that
eyes,
Hades
like,
is missing,
that's
so it's a little bit
insane.
different.
Yeah, yeah.
But
And the fun part is that if they don't have a ramp. Like we are saying that Hades is threatening, and somebody may say, well, of course, but BPrep is the same thing, but they don't ramp. And the thing is that they can be on 4 or 5 mana. We are on 7. We are playing Clarabel. We are drawing all our cards, and we can just bend them before they get uh, to 7 to even threaten the Be Prepared. Of course, it's a nasty top deck if you are not really on the board yet, and they will just top deck something, ink it, and the next card they top deck Be Prepared. Like that's Disneyland story, but it does happen. But still, even after that, you can recover from it. And Basil, like it's a absolutely hero in this matchup. When they play anything, we just bounce it and just keep discarding them with the Basil, because the Basil, of course, discards one card. And this comes clutch when they are playing sharks. Just play the Basil, bounce something, or bounce the shark. Next turn, play a song, bounce the shark back, discard it. Amazing. And Rubiyama is one of our best matchup. I would say the best one.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was my experience over the weekend. I played it one time, I think, and then the player was just so flustered by the end. He was just getting bullied left and right. And like you said, right,
Yeah, that's what we do.
they don't get to that be prepared turn. Like you don't like even if they do at that point, you're so resource rich, it doesn't even matter. You've already won the game more or less. Their sharks
Yeah.
are easily dealt with. The discard matchup is one that I'd say is probably our second worst matchup. And another reason why.
Definitely. I would say the worst. Personally, I would say the worst. But from what we've talked about, you seem to have a great experience into the deck, and I am not really sure. And I would rather play the aggro and have the coin flip on the play or the draw than to play like the discard matchup, especially the steel discard matchup. But yeah, we just established those are the two worst decks.
Yeah, for sure. And this is where like trying to gain some points with that cloud kicker into the deck, maybe get us a little bit of leverage there because it can take them off that
Yeah.
early Diablo, take them off that early Singer on the Ursula. But the fact that they're on Ursula too, almost always going to hit with this deck. We're playing so many songs, and they have a lot of tools that really do just play around. They have the word on the Prince John and things like that. Not unwinnable though. I did play it this past weekend at CCS and went 2-0 against it, and a lot of that factor just came down to they not knowing how to play against the deck, right? Like they were scared that I was going to deck them at one point and just stop drawing with Diablo after I had a Clarabel in play. So it's just one of those things. Like if you play a deck that has like it takes a unique angle, sometimes people don't know what they're doing with it. But a good discard player, I think, is probably one of your worst things you want to see. But that being said, if we're looking at the kind of metagame share that discard has right now, over the last 2 weeks, we didn't see any Emerald Steel discard kind of make any top cuts, and realistically, the aggro deck is actually didn't make too many top cuts either. So we may be well positioned in this metagame based off of that. Something maybe this is.
Yeah, that's one of what I wanted to touch on is that I might sound a little bit like negative because I'm saying like this is a bad matchup, this is a bad matchup. But every deck has a bad matchup. If it didn't, it would be the best deck in the game and nothing else would be played. So those are, we have few weaknesses, but if you look at the spreadsheet here, like nearly everything else is really, really good matchup for us. And it seems, at least in Europe and from what I'm seeing, or yeah, maybe not just Europe, everywhere, that the aggro decks and the discard is being pushed out by maybe the Blue Pro and the classic Amber Steel song. So the meta is still evolving a little bit, but I think it's evolving in the way that benefits us greatly. So
Yeah,
yeah, we are like A tier or S tier maybe. I would even say S tier. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, we definitely have looking at the metagame here, these blue red decks are something we really prey upon. We haven't talked about that a ton, but really the shark decks are very slow. They're relatively easy to deal with. There are some circumstances in which you have to kind of know your play lines and get those reps in. Same with the items decks. Kind of the same story as we sometimes see with that Ruby Amethyst. With the items decks, you can get so far ahead with your ink that you can run a bend to your will out there before they really can get established. And as a player who's played a lot of items, I can tell you that it really just a matter of they have to have a collection of resources to be able to make that deck good. You need multiple Maurice's workshops. So if you can bend them before they see that multiple Maurice's workshops, or even you're welcome that workshop into their deck and then bend them, which was often the case for me this weekend. They really don't have any way out of that. So I consider both the blue red decks good, and like we said, a few others that are really great: Steel Song, Blurple, your Ruby Amethyst, and I'd say majority of your purple greens. I played level 9,000.
Yes, definitely the discard one. It got a little bit worse because of the levers, but from the last set, like the Diablo discard is really really good matchup for us.
It just depends. There's so many different ways to build that Amethyst Emerald deck right now, but for the most part, it's just it's a matter of leveraging those muses. Those muses hit almost all the cards in their deck, right? Like it's almost
Yeah.
everything in their deck is 2 power or less. So if you can get your engine going, it's very hard for them to recover.
And even with the Helamphus, we are actually targeting Iagos as well, really good.
Mm-hmm.
So that is for free if you can just play Helamphus, get rid of their Iago, bounce Diablo, bounce anything. You can get a little bit burned by a Gogo, and that happens, but if you play smartly and you will just stick to your game plan and do not give them any like way to damage your characters, and if they do, you have obstacles. So yeah, if you want to tech for that matchup, and you actually did tech for it, the Peter Pan is really nice answer because they cannot jump you with the goals, with the go-go's and stuff like that. It will just stop everything. So we have basically answers to any threat that's going on in the meta, but the deck can be adjusted in so many ways, and you just have to choose what you are targeting and what you want to do and what your meta game looks like.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Just wanted to round us out by talking about some of the play lines and just like if you're trying to play with this deck for the first time, maybe you're kind of struggling with it, some of the things you should be doing when you're mulliganing and what we're looking for. Um, the first things first, and I'll mention here is these 4 cards, right? So the Sail the Azurite Sea and Tipo. If you played any blue deck that's kind of playing these cards, you know that we're hard mulliganing. We're really looking for this turn 2 ramp, the Sail the Azurite Sea and Tipo. I would put almost every single card back, besides maybe a Develop or a Popsicle, looking for
Yeah.
these two
Yep.
cards
Yep.
initially on the mulligan. The only reason I would keep maybe a Develop or a Popsicle is it just gives you the redraw, and sometimes you can get the numbers work out in such a way that you're not necessarily net losing anything. Um, but yeah, we're really reliant upon this turn 2 ramp to get going. The other engine in the deck, I'll let JP talk about it a little bit, is something kind of came in and out of the deck, but worked well for me this weekend. This Popsicle and Bell.
So Popsicle and Bell, yeah, those are really, really good cards in this deck. So as you mentioned, if you are missing a ramp, I usually keep Popsicle, and if I have Popsicle and Develop Your Brain, I will keep Develop Your Brain and send even the Popsicle because on turn 1 I just want to see more cards if I somehow miss the ramp, right? But Popsicle and Bell, and in my case Tamatoa, I know you cut it, but for me it's really important. I at one point cut Bell, so we are like trying everything that can be do with these cards and this package. But what they actually do, Popsicle of course cycle through your deck, and with a deck like ours, when we have basically infinite ink, it just makes our deck 56 cards, which means we see our cards, the core cards, way more often. That's for one. Second of all, Bell is basically an anti-aggro tool, let's call it that. But in this deck, the more important thing is that it's a singer that can be developed extremely early and basically allows you to play Muses on 4, Sting with Bell, Bounce 2, and if you do that, the game's really much swing into your favor. So that's one thing. Of course, those cards will help you empty your hand when you are going to refill with Clarabel. So let's say you have 6 cards in your hand, you just play Popsicle Bell, you just throw it all on the board. And of course, then there is a Tamatoa. For me, Tamatoa is really, really important in the deck. Currently, in the last deck list that I'm playing, that was shown at the start of the video, I'm playing only one. But a week ago, I was playing three, so it really depends. But basically, what it does is it's a good body that can sync everything in the deck that will draw us 2 cards. and you can do like all fancy stuff. I don't think we have time to go over everything in this video, but you can do like cheesy stuff like bounce, play Mother Knows the Best on your own Tamatoa, replay it, you have 17 ink, you don't care, you just showing cards, you're getting your answers. And the thing that there are two more things. One is a secret. One of is a thing that a lot of people who try this list never um, really know the value of, and that's healing. Healing is could be think about like a tempo gain, because when you are playing against aggro and you have Bell on the board, you will just tap it into Piglet. Alright, it's now 3-1 and it dies to everything. If you just heal it and take out another target, it's amazing. Of course, it will protect you against Go-Go if they just hit into something, you can just heal it out. And for me, the healing has been proven to be very good in this deck. And the last point that I wanted to make about the Popsicle is, um, and you are one of the few guys that actually play this trick, is to your welcome your own Popsicle. If you have Singer on the board, your welcome immediately becomes friends on the other side, which makes the card absolutely amazing, flexible, and let's go. I mean, we were talking about, I was cutting Bell, you were cutting Tamatoas, but none of us would want to cut the Popsicles. I would maybe in like some complete different reality, if Beldo didn't exist or Tamatoa, I maybe would play Popsicle by themselves. They are that good.
Yeah, somebody said something to me. I can't remember who it was that kind of likened Bell Popsicle. And I know you're an old school Magic player, but anybody who has played Magic before is like, I think of it like Force of Will, right? Like, I don't mind going down that card or playing for this kind of one narrow situation, because the upside on the Popsicle Bell just puts you so far ahead in the matchups where you really need that early presence. And you don't necessarily need the Bell in every matchup. If you do know what you're playing against, right? Like, Bell is not necessarily good against discard. We're not challenging any of those characters. She's not good into these control decks. We don't necessarily need the Singer there. We have a little more time to develop other lines. So it's inkable. The Popsicle, like you said, still has that tertiary value. Like, you're welcoming it. Just healing and just the card selection. Just seeing 4 more cards over the course of your deck, it just has its own value. So to me, Popsicle is not a cost per se. And the Bell is a little bit narrow with only having 1 item, but in those situations where you can find, hey, I have my turn 1 Popsicle into Bell into turn 2 ramp, you find yourself really ahead on board. So I think it's worth it having in the deck. Time will tell if this is something that this needs to be at all times. I think it's right now its biggest situation where it gains its value is having that Singer for those early aggressive decks. And that body being 3/3 trades with almost everything early in the game, right? Like Fox.
And it's inkable.
Yeah.
I mean, it's inkable. That's no worries there.
So you play for the high roll. You don't always see it, but if we do see the high roll in the matchups where you need it, really helped me this weekend to be able to actually do something with these aggro decks on the play at least. Really, from there, as you're establishing lines with the deck, your ramp on turn 2 is really looking to play on turn 3 one of these bodies. Against your more aggressive lines, you're going to be wanting to play Muses, but often Grandma Tala into Muses the next turn can be a good play line for us, where she is that 3/3 body that's a little bit harder to deal with, and just that card economy, right? Like keeping a healthy hand. Against Amber Steel, especially, we want to have Muses pretty early with that Bell line where we can sing on that turn 3 with Bell that we played earlier in the turns, and where we can potentially bounce 2 different things with something like a Mother Knows Your Best, or in the most recent build, like Heffalumps and Woozles, negate something like a Daisy or a Smee, and then return something, one of their other, like a Piglet. But against your control decks and your mid-range decks and things like that, often we do have time to go Grandma Tala turn 3, get a little bit of card selection. If you don't have that Clarabel in hand, it gives us another look at potentially getting more lines to find that Clarabel for a big payoff turn. But this is really your setup turn, right? Like you are going to want to run out Grandma Tala or Muses because they're going to sing the majority of your songs in your deck, and set up for the turn where we do want to have Clarabel in play, have all our singers activated so that we can actually get them to sing songs and return things to people's hands and draw all our cards to come back. Often with these, you'll find yourself playing Grandma Tala first on turn 3.
Yep.
At which point, we can follow it with the Muses. Maybe we have another sail to get that other ink out of it, or this is where Develop Your Brain can be played in. That turn we have 5 ink or a popsicle. Yeah, for sure. So just getting you more looks, but really critical on our turns. John, do you want to add anything there?
Here, I mean, we don't have really time to go through every single line on the turn 4 and turn 3 and 4 against every single deck, but there are a lot of choices. Like the most basic thing is like you play Tala on 3, you play Muses on 4 with a Popsicle, and then game go on. Because with the Tala you can think how far I go, Muses will bounce something, and so on. There are a lot of matchups, let's say classic steel song, when you want to develop Muses first, because they are so crucial and you don't care about anything else, just getting them on the board as soon as possible before they wheel you and stuff like that. Also, I don't know if it's on the slides or no, there's a Donald. And Donald is really important as well because he will get you to a Clarabel faster when you don't have How Far I Go. And if you have a Donald, you probably want to play Muses on 3, then Donald, then go to Clarabel. But there's one really important point I want to make is that if you play the Muses and Donald, and if your Muses are in any way threatened, you do not sing with them. No matter what happened, like you shouldn't exert them if they are in any way threatened. So yeah, that's just like the only thing I wanted to add.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I do find myself singing with them at times when I am, really just having to take advantage of a situation on board. But if there's the threat of a fox or threat of like a crab coming down, things like that, your muse is dying in some of those situations. It's not worth it. Maybe just wait the next turn to play it on that line. Really, you find yourself leveraging the muses quite a bit. Something along those lines I'll mention, just for what JP is saying though, is just think about the ward and think about the cards in their deck though. If they aren't playing these rush characters, if they don't have ways to buff their characters on board, muses are more or less safe, right? Like if they have a 2/2 in play, for decks that aren't playing rush characters, you can sing with those muses. They can challenge it, even with a 3/3 or whatever, and it's safe because that word is going to come into play. So if you do know the contents of their deck, if they're playing one of these meta decks that we talked about before, Steel Song is a good example of it. Like they can't hit it with any of their songs or anything like that. So you can sometimes challenge in to like a Piglet if you know that you can protect it with balance and things like that. So. Don't be afraid to
exactly.
if you know the play lines aren't there for them to take advantage of you. The rest of what I have here is just talking about the songs themselves and what that tends to play out as. Really, the critical card of the deck is going to be this Clarabel, right? The 7-cost Clarabel. And we talked about, hey, we're going to ramp on turn 2, hit an extra ink there into our turn 4, our 4-cost singers, and on turn 5, potentially play that Donald or potentially play a How Far I'll Go to get us one more ink up. But really, the critical turn is going to be that turn after we hit that 7 ink, right? Where we can play the Clarabel, and often you want to hold your songs for that turn. So instead of playing the You're Welcome early or the Mother Knows Best early, or if you have the time against some of these decks that play a little bit slower, your Blurples, your Purple Reds, and things like that, and your Blue Reds, we set up a situation in which our singers are set up. We play the Clarabel, play a You're Welcome on one of their characters, bounce something with the muses potentially, Mother Knows Best something, right? Play a How Far I'll Go, bounce something, play as many as 3 songs in a single turn, where we can get to a point where they have a healthy hand, you have a Clarabel, you potentially have 1 or 0 cards in hand, and are drawing 4 to 5 cards. As many as
Yeah.
I've drawn, like 8 cards against Blurple one time. Just you're welcoming something into their deck, and for a lot of decks, this is unrecoverable. If they cannot dump their hand and kind of deal with your board at that point, you have a 5/6 in play. You have a couple of you know you know 3/3 singers or 2/4 singers or potentially this Donald Duck. Those bodies are enough to finish cross the finish line. At that point, you're leveraging those cards for the rest of the game. So really, that is where this deck thrives, is just finding that Clarabel on that critical turn on turns where we get that 7 ink, playing multiple songs in turn, returning multiple things, and putting them way on the back foot and gaining resources as a result of it.
Yeah, this combination is exactly as you said. Like that's the crucial, that's the big bang of the deck. And here is one important aspect of the deck, which is patience. You have to be patient. You have to know what you are doing. You have to evaluate the threat. If you have time, if you do not have time, if you do have time, as you said, you want to keep the songs, do it all at once, refill their hand, like then do 7 cards and draw like 5 cards with the Clarabel. This is crucial for the deck because once you run out of cards, you don't have any defense, you don't have board. So having your hand healthy is like the core of the deck. And there's one thing that maybe is not obvious for everyone. And when I showed the deck list for the first time, and people were asking me like, "Yo, I don't know, I banned them, and then I lose the game, and what am I doing wrong?" The thing that people usually do wrong is that they do not value our cards over our opponents. That means you always want to stabilize yourself first before bending them. So a lot of people were like, "Oh, they have 5 cards. I'm on 7 mana. I'll just play bend and stop them." Yeah, but then you have like 1 or 2 cards and you are struggling a bit. Our cards are mostly, with the combination of muses and other stuff, more powerful and are more valuable than one of our cards to one of opponent's cards. And first is to refill. Once you refill with the Clara, you can get hit with the lever, you can get hit with Bruno or something like that. Usually, you want to follow up that with the bend, and that is like devastating. That's game over. Some decks can dump their hand. Let's say they have 5, 6 mana and they will play like 2 cost, 1 cost, 1 cost. I don't know, 3 cost. That's a little bit annoying. But if you draw with Clara well, if you didn't break, you can do all the bouncing back to their hand. Same as you did last turn, so you will just do exactly the same, but now instead of clearing with the Clara, but if you have healthy hand, you will just bend them, keep your 6 or 7 cards, and it's game over. That's when the lock is established, and yeah, the game is won at the turn 7, 8, usually.
Yeah, just that's a good transition point to talk about Bend here for a minute. I've seen a lot of other lists for Blue Green playing as many as 3 or 4 of these Bend by Wills. And to John's point, like really the deck thrives when they have a healthy hand. Against the decks where they cannot play anything of substance, really they're just replaying their characters and things like that. We would rather, oftentimes in this past weekend and just on ladder and things like that, I don't necessarily ever have to play the Bend to win the game. It's just a matter of continuing to play songs, denying them resources and things like that. There are some matchups where Bend to My Will is going to be really critical, and we are actively looking for it in the Blurples and the Purple Reds, and especially some of the Red Blues. Bend to My Will plays a little bit of a higher function against those control decks, but often, as long as we have a healthy hand and they're not able to contest our board, you end up with a situation where we're drawing 3 or 4 cards, maybe 5 cards a turn. You have a healthy board of these bells that are left over, the Donald Ducks, Clarabels, things like that. 1 and 2 questers, and if your board is just insurmountable for them, if they don't have board wipes. In the decks where they do have board wipes, Bend is going to play a really good role there, and of course they still can top deck those bends or top deck those board wipes against us. Specifically, be prepared. I'll say, Sisu doesn't really do a ton to this deck. Because if in the Sisu matchups we don't necessarily even play our muses. But
Yeah.
Bend is a game plan, but I would say not necessarily always the primary game plan. So the value engine, ideally you get that Clarabel burst of draw first, and then if they do deal with your Clarabel with something like a Hades or something like a Be Prepared or whatever what have you, a following up with a Bend is a really good place to be. When you have that 5-6 card hand, they have a 0 card hand. We're obviously going to be able to push that into a mid game, late game where we win that.
Yeah, there are a lot of like really tough decisions you have to make because at some point, if you get your Clarabel gets Hades, of course band is easy. I don't have Clarabel, I don't have to refill. Here's your band, 2 cards, 3 cards, it's good enough. But if you don't lose Clarabel and you have the band, there are some times when you, as you mentioned, really don't even need to play the band or maybe want to play the band. If you can constantly like dump your hand, control everything, refill, then maybe the band is not necessary. But yeah, like the easiest thing to say about this deck is like, oh, what does this deck do? Well, we bounce band, as I like to say, BBB, bounce band, right? But there are some things, and sometimes we do not want to play band, and the reason we play just 2 is it's very bricky card that for once, like it can brick you completely, and it did happen to me that I play only 2 and I have 2 in my hands at turn 4 and I cannot imagine playing more. And on the other hand, as you could see in my version and the edited version, there is always develop your brain and the visions and the popsicles and stuff like that. And we fly through our deck really fast and we can find what we need, so we can find the band pretty easily if we are looking for it. And one thing is like maybe what to do with band when playing against hyper aggro and stuff like that. It's really interesting, but even in a matchup like hyper aggro, band is could be a winning play because if you get to 7 mana, if you get there, if you like run, it's not a difficult art. It's like 4 turns, and you play Clara. And you have your removal, you have set up mooses, you will just bounce everything, and usually they will just replay it back. And of course, we cannot bounce the dog. We don't want bounce doctor, lady, and stuff like that. But once you set up Clarabel, you bounce everything, you refill. Maybe the next turn against aggro is to bounce everything they will play back and just play band. And once they are like on 15 lore, you are at 0, and you bounce everything and bend them, the game is won. Because you usually have answers to every top deck that they have, and you will just get there in time, hopefully.
Yeah, once you have set up your engine, really it's hard for a lot of decks to recover. And you don't necessarily always have to slam the door with Bend to My Will, but it is nice, even against like Amber Steel aggro, where I've seen myself play Amber Steel aggro, and the mid to late game where we are in the process of locking them out, bounce everything to their hand, even their Peats, and then just bend to my will to finish them. Against stuff like a blue-red, I often find myself wanting to play as many Your Welcomes as I can against some of their resource pieces before I bend, just so they will draw extra cards and potentially bend to get those Be Prepareds out, to get those Sisus out, to get those Workshops out of the deck, so that they don't have those as potential top decks. So if you are playing against those blue-red decks and things like that, and you have the opportunity to You're Welcome for value, I encourage you just to do it to get get them to draw more cards and potentially get a bigger bend against some of those decks. One of the play lines I found myself doing quite a bit is just trying to get those Be Prepareds out of their deck so that their top decks are worse.
Yeah, here is a really funny card, and maybe you ask the question as well if you play against this list. My opponents like it happened like so many times when they ask me, do I have to draw for your welcome? Yes, you do have to draw for your welcome. And it's like really said, like shuffle this into your deck. They shuffle, draw two cards, and like, "Ah, do I have to? Yes, you do. Bend to my will." And that's really important thing to as you mentioned, to get their resources out of the deck, that they will not top deck them. Of course, it's a luck factor, but of course you want to play into your odds every time.
Yeah, for sure. One of the main things you mentioned earlier is this piece for this one of the engines we have set to set up is this Lady Tremaine, right? So if it's not obvious, just to talk you through the kind of this play line, Lady Tremaine obviously can pick up an action card from your discard of your hand with muses in play, something like your welcome, something like Mother Knows Best can pick up. We can play the Mother Knows Best with singing with one of our characters or just playing it straight up. And for every time we play those songs, you can use the muses to bounce Lady Tremaine to your hand. Now, this deck, if you haven't played with it before, we're often at 10, 15 ink, something along those lines. So you can find yourself being able to potentially Lady Tremaine, play multiple songs in a turn on 0 or near 0 resources. Talking back to the bend for a second, this is also a situation where if you discarded a bend early, or if you need to bend them again, you can go with Lady Tremaine and use this and pick up that bend, and actually replay a bunch of your bounce spells and actually put them back to 0 if they for somehow were able to claw out of that situation. So really just an inevitability in this line where we can play that Lady Tremaine, and a muses represents basically an infinite action as long as we have the ink to do so.
Yeah, the infinite Tremaine loop. That's what we call it. Um, as you said, you play Tremaine, you get a card, you sing it, you bounce Tremaine back to your hand, you replay it. It's not uncommon to have like 15, 19 ink. I was in the game when I had 19 ink and I play Lady Tremaine 3 times in a turn and bounce everything around even more to 22 or something like that. This card seems like the worst card ever, but you have to think about it with the combination with the muses, where one attack is actually really good, and most of the time you need to bounce your Tremaine to your hand to keep it safe, and then replay another turn and stuff like that. And the most crazy thing ever is when you have 2 of them, two muses and like Tremaine. You can just bounce everything they played, bounce your Tremaine as well, replay it, do it again, and do it again, and do it again, and do it again, and do it again. And it's really crucial card to the deck. And if you are looking to play green and blue, you have to play Lady Tremaine. If you don't, the deck doesn't do what it needs to do.
Yeah, definitely found myself playing Lady Tremaine just to get like a visions in the mid game sometimes. They were able to deal with a Clarabel or deal with a Basil, but we have, these critical threats that we need to find, right? Like Lady Tremaine, go get visions to find me my next Clarabel after they've dealt with maybe 2 Clarabels already. We can see so many cards as a result of some of these things. Also, Lady Tremaine with something like your welcome. We talked about kind of those bend lines where I can potentially go get your welcome, make them draw more cards so that my bend is bigger, and I can potentially resource deny more cards out of their deck. Obviously, it's random there, but your welcome is when you're about to bend. Your welcome is just a straight up answer. It's a better than an answer for most things. You're actually making them mill a card effectively, as in addition to actually dealing with their threats. So, a lot of play lines where I found Lady Tremaine to be like just a critical mass. And when we are in a resource light situation, Lady Tremaine replaying things over and over and over again, we're potentially in that grinding mode in the mid game where they recovered a little bit of resources, things like that. She can just slam the door on a lot of decks.
Yes, exactly. She will end the games which are not really like decided yet. She will just finish the game by herself. And as you said that you sometimes just get the visions, I even got whatever develop your brain just to have an ink. It happened to me sometimes. You can like not have a perfect game. You can just land on the Tremaine, get an ink from the discard, just ink it, survive another turn, get to your Clarabel. She will do a lot. And if, like, she's 1-5, if she's a brawl or something like that, still, like, she's, I don't know, that's okay if they, like, Dragonfire Lady Tremaine then to Dragonfire Basil or something like that. So if a good player will understand the Lady Tremaine role in the deck and will try to target it. That's why it's important to also hide her to your back to your hand very quickly. But she can do amazing stuff. If you are absolutely sure that she will not get removed next turn, you can keep it on the board, sync with her, bounce her back, and that's she's just a good card.
Yeah, definitely an engine to be familiar with if you're playing this deck. And that kind of closes out. I'm gonna take us back to just looking at the list and kind of where we stand here. Definitely, I'm going to be testing this more. I know I have a couple of big tournaments coming up where in Texas for the PPG event there is a 10K and a 15K, and really still top of my list as far as things to play right now. Really, where I got a lot of the questions about this deck and kind of where what prompted me to kind of make a video is I had a lot of the different testing teams asked me about the deck and asked for the deck list and kind of how it's playing in the metagame, how the matchups are working. We talked about kind of the rogue factor here, but another thing to kind of consider is for Worlds competitors is this blue-green opens up different avenues for your other decks, right? If you do decide to go blue-green color combination, you could potentially go Ruby Amethyst and potentially go something Steel like Song. A Steel Song, right? So if this is a direction you want to go, you can kind of hedge out your bad matchups that way as well. And we talked about Green Steel and Amber Steel, aggro really being those bad matchups, and where we have a collection of really good matchups. If you do ban out that
like
Green
the crazy thing about the world format is the ban. You can ban one list, and if you were paying attention, we said that our the bad matchups is everything with steel. So if somebody is brave enough and will test it and get good at it, and just ban the steel decks, that's just insane strategies in my eyes. Of course, probably nobody will take a blue-green, but if there is some tournaments in Worlds format, I would definitely pick a blue-green, just ban steel, and just roll over.
Yeah, and of course, the metagame with Amber Steel aggro not making a ton of big finishes this last weekend. I think we may be in a good spot where some of those other decks are prominent, and we may have a good showing. So feel free to grind on the ladder if you guys have questions. I know both of us are in the 20 lore Discord for Blue Green quite a bit, and potentially can talk through some minor play lines and stuff like that. I'll mention here if you do need help with just playing in general, like whatever, if you're preparing for an event or whatever, I do coaching. Be happy to work out with you some coaching on the side. I'll leave some information in the description here, but yeah, hopefully this was useful to people. May do a revisit here in the next week or so, just to see how it's played on the ladder and kind of how things are shaking up. And of course, I'll let you guys know how that event goes in Texas if I end up sticking with the blue-green there. But so far, so good. I think we're in a good position in the metagame. So it may be a situation where I'm going to bring this one versus my pet deck, which is blue-red items. So far, I've been really, really digging the blue-green and how it's fared out in the metagame. JP, any last words?
If anybody wants to follow me and follow updates on this deck, you can find me on Twitter. Hopefully Fungus will fit on the screen. And yeah, I'm in the process of writing a guide on this deck, but I'm really lazy and the deck is really complicated. So maybe, hopefully, if there is something, we will hopefully update you. And yeah, that's it. See you on the Twitter. See you on the Discord. Shout out to Fungus for big achievement with the Stax deck, putting us on the map. And if you have any question, join us maybe on the 20 Lord Discord. You know where to find us. And see you next time.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.